On the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, when I would see people, hey Will, hey Will, hey Will. And then as soon as Independence Day came out, it was the first time somebody called me Mr. Smith. Right, so it was a really, movie stardom.
Fame looks solid until a single moment cracks it. One line on a live stage, a careless post, or an offset decision can turn certainty into doubt in seconds. The bright image stays, but trust slips. Headlines repeat. Jokes stick. Doors that once opened on a smile begin to stay shut. Power in entertainment runs on timing, goodwill, and the sense that a name is safe to stand beside. Studios insure it. Brands rent it. Audiences project meaning onto it. When confidence breaks, the system that once protected a star starts protecting itself instead. Projects pause. Lawyers speak. Silence grows. The fall rarely feels dramatic from the inside. It feels like momentum losing air. Fewer calls, softer offers, friendly faces turning careful. A reputation doesn't shatter like glass. It thins out, becomes hard to hold, then slips away. Recovery is possible, but it moves slower than scandal. It needs patience, smaller rooms, and choices that don't ask for applause. Time can add context. It rarely erases memory. In this world, the spotlight gives shape to a career, and gravity gives it limits. Will Smith. One quiet walk to a stage turned a spotless image into a question mark. The motion was simple. The impact was not. Years of warmth, jokes, and careful charm met a single flash of anger under the brightest lights in the business. The room froze while millions watched in real time. The clip replayed until it became shorthand. A name once tied to ease started carrying tension. Fallout arrived in steps. Formal apologies appeared. A 10-year ban from Academy events set a long clock. Projects slowed or shifted in tone. Partners recalculated risk. Awards night triumph sat next to a moment no headline could soften. The contrast did the damage. Discipline versus a sudden break in discipline. Recovery is moving at a quieter speed. Fewer public swings. Interviews built around ownership rather than spin. Work presented without victory laps. The plan is patience, stacking steady choices until the newer image feels stronger than the paused frame from that night. In this business, momentum can be loud, but repair is almost always quiet. Charlie Sheen. The slogans were everywhere. Tiger blood, winning, a victory lap said out loud. For a while, the chaos felt like a bit that paid. Then the studio cut ties with its highest paid star, and the punchline stopped cushioning the fall. The headlines didn't slow, the work did. Consequences landed in sequence. A firing mid-run broke the illusion that attention could substitute for reliability. The audience that once laughed along started to look past the noise and notice the wreckage underneath. The show continued without him, which said as much as any statement. What followed was drift, new projects with less heat, a brand that couldn't outrun its own catchphrases. Fame can amplify a persona. It cannot maintain it when trust collapses. The lesson was blunt. The market will trade spectacle for stability the second the product is at risk. Katherine Heigl. Momentum looked effortless. A TV breakout, an Emmy, box office rom-coms that printed money. Then came a few sentences in interviews that wouldn't fade. Critiques of a hit film, a public withdrawal from awards consideration over writing quality, frank complaints about punishing hours. The quotes became a second resume. Rooms turned cautious. The difficult label, earned or not, travels faster than any reel. Offers narrowed, and every pitch now carried a silent question about what might be said later. In a business built on fragile trust, the safer choice was often the next name on the list. The arc didn't crash so much as thin out. Supporting roles replaced leads. The spotlight cooled but didn't vanish. Honesty can be admirable and still be expensive. Once a narrative hardens, it takes years of steady work to sand it back down. Kevin Spacey. An allegation surfaced, and the response became part of the story. An apology paired with a personal revelation that blurred lines and drew sharp criticism. The industry moved at rare speed. A streaming giant severed ties. A finished role in a major film was reshot with another actor, turning locked picture into a myth. The professional isolation was near total. Projects unraveled, awards chatter died, and the machine that once centered him learned how to erase him from frames already captured. Sunk costs proved less important than reputational risk. The calculation had changed. Later legal outcomes did not restore the old normal. For casting directors, insurers, and audiences, the shift was already complete. Trust, once lost at that scale, is not rebuilt by precedent. It's replaced by absence. Alec Baldwin. A rehearsal on a small-budget western became the center of a storm when a prop weapon discharged and a life was lost with another person injured. The shock moved beyond the cast and crew into an industry-wide reckoning over habits that had hardened into routine: who checks what, who signs off, and how assumptions stack until they fail. Overnight, a working set turned into an investigation scene, and a familiar leading man became the name attached to a tragedy that no one could reduce to a PR line. Legal turns arrived in waves, charges considered, filed, reversed, discussed again, while civil suits and public arguments pulled every choice apart frame by frame. The conversation wasn't just about a single moment, it was about systems, armor of protocols, chain of custody for weapons, pressure on schedules, and the blurred border between an actor's responsibility and a producer's. The story kept moving even when the cameras stopped, because accountability in a workplace isn't a genre, it's a structure, and structures get tested most when the outcome is irreversible. Work continued in the long shadow of what happened, but the perception changed for everyone involved. Sets tightened rules once thought good enough. Studios revisited risk on scenes that used to be handled by habit, and audiences learned more about the mechanics of filmmaking than they ever wanted to know. Confidence, once automatic around a veteran name, now had to be measured against a tragedy that will remain part of the record no matter how carefully the next project is run. James Franco. The public image was that of a restless multitasker actor, director, teacher, moving from stage to set to classroom, with the energy of someone who never needed a lane. That reach became scrutiny when former students described blurred boundaries and pressure that didn't feel like instruction. The optics were brutal. Award season applause paired with headlines about conduct inside spaces that depend on trust, and the contradiction spoke louder than any acceptance speech. Consequences unfolded quietly, which is how they often land in this business. There was a settlement that closed one chapter without offering the kind of clarity that restores confidence, and the phone stopped ringing for the roles that once arrived without effort. Projects evaporated mid-rumor, collaborators stepped sideways rather than engage the debate, and the industry sent its message without a press conference. Momentum is a privilege, not a right, and reputational risk is more expensive than a delay. The afterlife of a scandal like this lives in rooms the public doesn't see. Insurance meetings, casting grids, back-channel calls where the question isn't just talent but predictability. Teaching titles, mentorship brands, and the optics of power differentials are read differently now, and that shift doesn't reverse quickly. Any path forward requires a version of accountability that convinces gatekeepers first, audiences second, and both only after time passes without new headlines. Amber Heard. A career built on a mix of indie credibility and blockbuster presence collided with a lawsuit that turned into a culture event, complete with live streams, subtitles, and a running chorus of online commentary. The courtroom became a stage no one could control. Testimony and exhibits were clipped into shareable moments, and every hour birthed interpretations that hardened into identity. When the verdict arrived, it carried legal weight, but the public narrative had already crystallized into sides that treated facts as flags. The professional fallout was immediate and uneven. Roles shrank, negotiations chilled, and even minor appearances acquired more baggage than their screen time could carry. Brand deals weighed exposure against controversy and stepped back. The larger lesson wasn't about who won a case, it was about how reputation gets adjudicated by audiences in real time, and how quickly a name can become a proxy for arguments far beyond a single career. Distance became strategy. Relocation, fewer public statements, careful calibration of any return, each move aimed to lower temperature in a climate that thrives on heat. The archive of clips and posts remains, and in an industry where perception is distribution, recovery means building new associations that are boring enough to be trusted and steady enough to outlast the scroll. Ellen DeGeneres. For years, the name meant easy warmth and frictionless joy. A daytime empire built on dancing, surprise giveaways, and the idea that kindness could be a brand. That image met resistance when staff accounts described a workplace that didn't match the slogan, turning a friendly facade into a question about what happens off camera. The dissonance was stark because the product wasn't just interviews and jokes. The product was a persona, and the allegations pressed directly against its core promise. The response arrived through apologies, internal changes, and the exit of senior producers, but reputational damage rarely moves on the same timetable as HR fixes. Advertisers and audiences don't audit policies. They remember headlines and attach them to faces. Ratings softened, the cultural glow cooled, and the final seasons landed with a kind of forced brightness that highlighted how much had shifted in the room. A show can survive controversy. A brand built on virtue struggles when the virtue is in dispute. What lingered was a lesson about scale. The larger the public claim, kindness as identity, the more brittle it becomes when private reports contradict it. Rebuilding from that point requires a different currency than charm, credible systems, quieter leadership, and an acceptance that some portion of the audience now treats the smile as a mask. Trust can return, but it tends to come back smaller and with terms. Ezra Miller. The career arc moved from indie promise to franchise centerpiece, then collided with a series of incidents that accumulated like a ledger rather than a single breaking point. A video from overseas, police reports from US stops, neighbors' complaints, and allegations that escalated in seriousness turned a rising profile into a running tally. The studio calculus shifted from marketing beats to risk management, and the headlines often outran the release calendar. An apology and a statement about seeking treatment reframed the narrative without erasing it. The problem wasn't just optics, it was predictability. Tentpole films rely on stable press tours, uncomplicated junkets, and a lead who can carry promotion without adding crisis management to the itinerary. Even with a finished film on the slate, the campaign felt constrained by the off-screen story, and box office potential had to compete with public fatigue. Paths forward exist, but they are narrow and conditional. Sustained stability, the absence of fresh incidents, and work that invites people to think about craft before controversy. In an age where the personal timeline is inseparable from the professional one, recovery looks less like a triumphant return and more like a long period of nothing newsworthy happening at all. Shia LaBeouf. The public image shifted over years from gifted live wire to deliberate provocateur, blurring the line between performance and personal unraveling. Art projects, street arrests, and symbolic gestures created a mythology of rebellion that critics could either admire or dismiss, but none of it forced a reckoning the way detailed allegations of abuse did. Once harm is described by someone close, the conversation stops being about spectacle and starts being about safety and responsibility. Acknowledgments followed, admissions of wrongdoing in broad terms, commitments to treatment, and a retreat from the spotlight, but acknowledgment is only the first mile of a very long road. The industry's appetite for volatility shrinks when legal risk and moral discomfort replace the harmless chaos of earlier antics. Directors who once valued rawness started weighing it against set culture, insurance questions, and the quiet morale of crews who follow the news. The remaining space is smaller, more selective, and dependent on proof that extends beyond words, years of steady conduct, the absence of new damage, and work that doesn't ask colleagues to gamble their reputations on the hope that the past stays in the past. Talent remains a constant. The conditions for using it have changed. Tobey Maguire. The rise was clean and iconic. A soft-spoken lead anchoring a billion-dollar superhero run, the kind of franchise that cements a face to an era. Off-screen stories complicated the picture. Rumors of hardball over contracts, whispers about set dynamics, and a reputation that didn't match the gentle hero molded for lunchboxes. None of it crashed the career outright, it just nudged the image away from myth and toward a cooler, more transactional read. Then a different arena supplied sharper edges. Accounts from high-stakes celebrity poker rooms painted a version of Maguire that felt clinical and cutting, a player more interested in leverage than charm. The tales weren't felonies or headlines with court dates, they were anecdotes with teeth, memories of humiliation, precision wins, and a competitiveness that left a taste. For a public that bonded with the earnestness of Peter Parker, the contrast did quiet, lasting work. The result was contraction rather than collapse. Fewer marquee leads, more producing, careful selections, and long stretches where nostalgia spoke louder than new momentum. When he did step back into the suit for a multiverse curtain call, the affection returned, but it was framed by time. The industry still respects capability, it just prefers it without the side narratives that make every meeting feel like a bet. Danny Masterson. What began as a steady television presence with a signature deadpan shifted into something heavier when long-standing allegations moved from rumor to legal record. As multiple accusers described assaults from years past, the comfortable sitcom association dissolved, replaced by a process that operates on evidence, testimony, and verdicts rather than PR and goodwill. The public language changed accordingly. Not cancellation, but criminal charges. Not speculation, but sentencing. The industry response was swift and structural. Roles severed, professional ties cut, companies and collaborators creating distance that could be measured in contracts as much as in statements. Courtrooms replaced sets. Filings replaced call sheets. Each development advanced the story beyond brand management and into the terrain where guilt, accountability, and protection of others take precedence over any entertainment value attached to a name. In that context, there is no traditional career conversation left to have. The legacy isn't a character or a long run on a hit show, it's the weight of the record and the message sent to colleagues and audiences about consequences that outlast ratings. The line between public figure and private citizen closed, and what remains is a case that will be referenced for what it decided, not what it streamed. Armie Hammer. The profile once felt engineered for permanence. Pedigree, leading man looks, a seamless blend of art house credibility and studio promise. Then came leaked messages, detailed accounts from women describing manipulative dynamics, and a wave of reporting that turned intrigue into unease. The conversation was less about a single event and more about patterns, how glamour and power can mask control until evidence stitches the pieces together. The professional slide was rapid. Agencies disengaged, productions recast, and projects in development quietly evaporated as stakeholders chose clarity over complication. In the absence of criminal convictions on many claims, the marketplace still made its judgment the way it always does, through risk models, brand adjacency, and the fear that every press tour might become a deposition by proxy. Reputation, once an asset, became a cost no budget wanted to carry. What followed has been a publicly humbler life. Interviews that mix contrition with context, talk of therapy and rebuilding, attempts to find space far from the center of the frame. Whether any durable return is possible depends on a calculus that includes time without fresh damage, proof of changed behavior that convinces skeptics, and work small enough to be allowed a trial without turning every headline into a referendum. In the modern archive, screenshots do not fade. Recovery must work around them. Jussie Smollett. The arc shifted in a single news cycle, from victim to planner, after investigators said an attack that drew national sympathy was staged. The reversal tore through the culture because it traded outrage for betrayal. A story built to rally people instead hollowed out trust. The details became symbols, receipts, surveillance clips, text threads, and each one chipped away at credibility that had once felt bankable. Consequences moved from sets to courtrooms. A conviction for disorderly conduct and a short jail sentence marked the legal end of one chapter, but the professional fallout proved longer. The role disappeared, the brand dissolved, and a name that used to carry progress became a cautionary shorthand in boardrooms where image risk is priced down to the comma. The distance from beloved to doubted was measured not in years, but in how fast a headline can flip. What remains is the hard math of reputation after a breach of faith. Audiences remember the feeling of being enlisted, then misled. Gatekeepers remember the scramble to reverse public promises. Any path back requires quiet work, smaller arenas, and a long wait for the noise to fade if it ever does. Megan Fox. The introduction was explosive, a breakout that fused pin-up magnetism with blockbuster scale, turning presence into brand in a single franchise. Then came an interview line that compared a star director to a dictator, and the machinery that once amplified her pivoted away. Schedules moved on without her, and a media ecosystem quick to celebrate her image proved just as quick to flatten her voice into a headline that wouldn't unstick. The next phase looked like drift, but underneath it a different read of the work gathered momentum. Jennifer's Body, dismissed on release, was gradually reclaimed as sharp satire, with Fox's performance recast as knowing rather than ornamental. The revision didn't rewrite the past so much as expose how that past had been framed, a system that loved her face and distrusted her agency. The reassessment arrived slowly, through essays, podcasts, rewatches, and younger audiences seeing their own era in the text. That shift opened a narrower, sturdier lane. The roles were more selective, the public stance more deliberate, and the narrative moved from fallen it girl to misread early, revalued late. Recovery here didn't mean a return to the exact same spotlight, it meant changing the light away from novelty toward authorship. The culture caught up to a performance it had once shrugged at, and the career followed with choices that didn't need the old stamp of approval to matter. Fame protects until it doesn't. A brand that feels permanent can tilt in a second, on stage, online, or behind a closed door that won't stay closed. The larger the glow, the harder the shadows land. What survives that turn is rarely hype, it's the slow work of showing steadiness when no one is clapping. Trust is the currency. Audiences lend it, studios insure it, and headlines test it. Once trust thins, momentum leaks, calls slow, scripts shrink, and the market chooses safety over surprise. Legal outcomes matter, but so do patterns, receipts, and the sense that proximity now carries risk. A path back exists for some, but it runs on time and smaller bets. The fix isn't a speech or a slogan, it's uneventful months, accountable choices, and work that doesn't ask the room to forget. Memory fades unevenly. Reframing takes patience. Which of these 15 falls most changed how you think about Invincible in Hollywood?